So let me just echo Julie's thanks for those of you who've turned up. It's great to see some very familiar faces, and it's great to see a lot of new faces as well. So I'm very happy to be here and to deliver the second half of the Clarivate double bill today. So after Julie's excellent sort of macro overview of how our businesses come together and the challenges and the trends in the publishing landscape, I'm going to go super micro. And I'm going to talk about two very specific but important changes that will be happening in the journal citation reports next year, which are related to the journal impact factor. So my name is Nandita Quaderi. I'm the Editor-in-Chief and VP Editorial of the Web of Science. So my team are effectively the gatekeepers of the Web of Science. So we're the ones that decide the editorial policies and the evaluation processes of what comes into the Web of Science and therefore the JCR and what comes out of the JCR and the Web of Science. So let's see if I can get this to work. No. Oops, what have I done? That way? That way? Here we are, super. So before talking about the specific changes, I wanted to provide a bit of context by giving a brief overview of the Web of Science core collection and its sister product, the JCR, and two of our journal metrics, the JIF and the JCI. So our goal at the Web of Science is to provide our customers with trusted content, data and metrics. And the provision of trusted content is becoming more and more important as the volume of fraudulent behavior is becoming ever greater and ever more sophisticated. So the way in which we provide these trusted data sets is by applying 3 levels of curation. So we start by curating our collection. We have a very rigorous evaluation process by which we select the journals, books, and proceedings within the core collection. We then apply very rigorous standards to our metadata. So we standardize and we aggregate in a way that allows us and our users to find things efficiently. And finally, we curate our metrics. So if we find signs that there's anomalies in citation behavior that suggests that the impact factor of a journal doesn't actually reflect the true scholarly value of that journal, we suppress those metrics. So the Web of Science platform contains 30-odd different products, some of which are proprietary, some of which are third-party and hosted on the platform. But at the very heart of the platform, we have something called the Web of Science core collection. And this consists of 6 citation indices, 4 for books, 4 for journals, 1 for books, and 1 for proceedings. So before we go any further, I just wanted to briefly explain what we mean by a citation index. So citation indices are built on a premise that was introduced by Dr. Eugene Garfield, one of the Eugenes that Julie alluded to earlier, in a seminal paper that was published in Science in 1955. And the premise is that there is a meaningful connection between an article and another article that either cites it or is cited by it. So if we take that as a given, what we can do is use cited references to build a citation network and identify connections between publications that wouldn't otherwise be found by something like keyword searching, for example. So at the Web of Science, for a given article that we index, we collect all its metadata, so by that I mean the journal title, authors, information about the abstract, etc. And then also its cited references, so the other articles it cites. And what we show here in the right is a very simplified version of what we do. And we do this again and again and again and again. So the little purple icons represent an article indexed in the core collection. And the arrows that go to the grey icons show cited references. What's often the case is the cited reference itself is indexed in the Web of Science, and that's shown by a purple icon with a little pink star. So you can see already how we start building a citation network by tracking through and joining the dots between articles using cited references. So to give you a sense of scale, I need to go to the opticians because I can't read this. So to give you a sense of scale, the Web of Science contains over 85 million articles, almost 300 million unique cited references, and almost 2 billion total citations. So what we have here in the middle is the little article that's shown in red. And this is a highly cited article. Highly cited articles play a really important part in the citation network by bringing together many, many dots, many, many articles. And there's been a lot of research into what do citations mean. And there is a general consensus that citations are acknowledgements of intellectual debt. And this is where the concept of a highly cited article having high scholarly impact comes from. Now, it's really important to note that we're not creating the citation network. We're purely revealing what the researchers create themselves. And citations that provide background information, context, and explanation add value to this citation network. Spurious citations that aren't adding context or explanation pollute the network. And so this is why we have this very rigorous evaluation to be very, very careful what we allow into the Web of Science and what contributes to the citation network. So this diagram is a schematic of the 6 indices within the Web of Science core collection. For the purposes of today's talk, I'm not going to talk about BKCI or CPCI, which are the books index and the proceedings index, and instead I'm going to concentrate on the 4 journals indices. So the 3 historic indices are discipline-specific, and they're shown on the top here. So we have the Science Citation Index Expanded, the Social Science Citation Index, and the Arts and Humanities Index. And below that, we have ESCI, the Emerging Sources Citation Index, which is much newer. It was launched in 2015, and it spans all disciplines. So in order to enter the core collection, we have a single evaluation process, whereby the team applies 28 selection criteria for journals. And these are divided into 2 buckets. We have 24 quality criteria, and with these quality criteria, we're looking for signs of editorial rigor and good publication ethics. If a journal passes those 24, it can enter ESCI. And what's important to note here that this entry into ESCI is selective. Only about 20% of journals pass, but it's not competitive. We're not comparing journals against other journals in terms, for example, of their citation activity. In contrast, to get into one of the discipline-specific indices, we are comparing journals, and that's when a journal has to pass the additional 4 impact criteria, where we're also looking for the most impactful, the most influential journals. And in those cases, we are looking for high citation activity because we're using citation activity as the proxy for scholarly impact. So what's important to note, again, is this is not a static collection. If a journal's in, it's not in for life. We monitor journals, we reevaluate journals. So journals in ESCI, for example, that gain impact could enter a discipline-specific index, and conversely, journals in a discipline-specific index, if they lose impact, could go into ESCI. Any journal, regardless of citation activity, if they no longer pass the quality criteria, are removed from the Web of Science. So this is just a schematic of the 28 criteria. I'm not going to go into this in any detail other than to say all of this is completely transparent on our website. So you've got the URL here. We've got all the different processes detailed for evaluation for books, for journals, and for proceedings. And we also hold regular webinars, which we call open house sessions, where we go through our processes, and there's sort of a Q&A session afterwards as well if people want to ask questions. And the next one of these will happen on the 14th of December. They're free. Just feel free to sign up. In terms of publishers wanting to submit a journal for evaluation, it has to come in via something called the publisher portal. And requests should come from the publisher. So what I mean is it has to come from the person that owns a journal rather than just an author or a member of the editorial board, for example. And the publisher portal should only be used for journals that are not already in the core collection. So these are for new evaluations. For journals that are already in the core collection but feel they should be in a different index, there is no reason to submit it. We monitor the journals, and that's something we do independently. So now let's turn to the relationship between the core collection and its sister product, the Journal Citation Reports, the JCR. The JCR is a journal intelligence platform. There is no separate evaluation process for the JCR. So it takes data and content from the Web of Science core collection. Unlike the core collection, which is updated daily, the JCR is updated once a year. It's an annual snapshot, and typically that update happens every June. So journals that are included in the Web of Science core collection at the beginning of the year and remain indexed at the time of JCR production, which is normally around March, are eligible to appear in that year's JCR release. So the JCR contains a wealth of data, but the one thing that gets most attention is the journal impact factor, the JIF. So the JIF was introduced in 1975, and it was originally created to help in-house editors choose which journals to include in the Science Citation Index, the forerunner to the Web of Science. And currently, the JIF is only provided for journals in the Science Citation Index Expanded and in the Social Sciences Citation Index. And at the top graphic there explains how a JIF is calculated. So in this June's JCR release, we released the JIF for 2021. So the JCR year is always the prior year. So the 2022 JCR release contains the 2021 JCR dataset. So the way we calculate it is to take citations in 2021 to items published in the 2 prior years. So in this case, in 2019 and 2020. And we divide that number by the number of citable items published in 2019 and 2020. And by citable items, what we mean are research articles and review articles. So the thing I want to really emphasize is that although only journals in the SAIE and SSCI are given a JIF, information from all 6 indices are used to calculate the JIF. So the JIF is used responsibly as a measure of journal performance. And these responsible use cases include the use of the JIF by librarians, for example, for collection management, and for publishers for journal and portfolio management. Unfortunately, in some quarters, the JIF is also used irresponsibly to evaluate things that aren't journals, for example, to evaluate individual articles or researchers during research assessment. And I'd just like to take this opportunity to re-emphasize that we do not condone this irresponsible use of the JIF at all. The JIF is only a responsible metric when it's used to measure the thing it was designed to measure. That is to say, journal citation performance, taking into account journal size. Any other use of the JIF, for example, for individual authors or for individual articles, is not responsible. And hopefully, if you look at these 2 citation profiles, you'll see why that is. So here we've got 2 journals, one with a JIF of around 15, one with a much lower JIF of around 5. What's immediately apparent is how skewed the citation distribution is within each of these journals. And this basic shape of distribution is the same for any journal, be it a journal with a super high JIF or a journal with a super low JIF. There tend to be a very small number of articles that have high citations, so these are the articles towards the right side of the graph, and very large number of articles with relatively small citations, and these are at the left side. So for example, here, I don't know if you can see, I've sort of put a little highlight around 2 articles, one in Journal A that has the high JIF and one in Journal B that has the low JIF. And it makes absolutely no sense that a researcher would get more credit for publishing in Journal A with a GIF of 15 when that particular article has been cited 6 times than a researcher that publishes in Journal B with the lower GIF when that particular article has been cited 11 times. So again, looking at the GIF of a journal gives us no information about how much one particular article within that journal was published. The GIF is a journal-level metric, and it should not be used to compare anything other than journals. So last year, we introduced another journal-level metric called the JCI, which is complementary to the GIF. So the JCI was introduced for all 4 journal indices, and unlike the GIF, it is normalized to allow easier comparisons. And it's normalized in 3 ways. It's normalized by field, by article age, and by article type. And the most important type, or the most useful type of normalization, is that normalization by field. Because what it does is it allows us to compare apples to oranges fairly. Because as we know, different fields have different average citation rates. And in general, citations in the arts and humanities are much lower than citations in the social sciences or sciences. So the way the GIF works is that a journal that has a GIF of 1 has activity which is effectively the average for that category. If a journal has a GIF of 0.5, it has citation activity half of the average for that discipline. If it has a JCI of 2, it's double. And what that allows, that normalization allows any user to look at the JCIs of journals in different fields and to compare journals in a way that's normalized and fair. So this slide highlights some of the most important differences and similarities between the GIF and the JCI. So we've already talked about one of those differences, and that's the sort of normalization of the JCI compared to the non-normalization of the GIF. The other major difference is the time frame. So the GIF acts across a much shorter time frame. It looks at citations from 1 year across publications from the prior 2 years. The JCI is looking at citations from 4 years across publications from 3 prior years. So again, the JCI is slightly more stable, if you like, whereas the GIF is slightly more current. So now let's turn our attention to the 2 changes that are coming in next year's JCI release. And these were announced over the summer through a press release and through a blog. So the first change is that at the moment, the GIF is only given to journals in the science and social science indices. We're going to expand that to journals in the Arts and Humanities Citation Index and in the Emerging Sources Citation Index. The second change is that we are going to change the way we display the GIF from 3 decimal places to 1 decimal place. So at the top level, this is what the GIF expansion is going to look like. Firstly, it's a simplification. So by expanding the GIF to all 4 journal indices, we're going to have alignment between what's covered in the Web of Science, what's covered in the JCR, what gets a GIF, and what gets a JCI. We'll also be providing much more data to our users, so the number of journals with a GIF will rise from around 12,000 to around 21,000. There'll be much greater journal and publisher representation. So again, around 9,000 more journals will get a GIF for the first time. And of these 9,000 journals, around 3,000 will come from smaller publishers, many of which are in the developing world. We'll have more open access coverage. There'll be around an 8% increase in OA coverage, and there'll be much more global representation. So the figure here says a 5% increase in journals from the Global South. This is a massive underrepresentation because what we aren't counting, which we don't have the data to count, is journals that are based in the Global South but are published by international publishing houses. So what are the benefits? Why are we doing this? Why are we giving all the journals in the core collection a GIF? First of all, I just want to note that the GIF is still a very selective metric because only around 20% of the journals that come in to be evaluated pass our criteria and enter into the core collection. The main driver for this is to really help level the playing field so that the emphasis is now on a journal being trustworthy rather than a journal being trustworthy and highly cited. And the journals that we are really trying to help by leveling the playing field are recently launched journals, open access journals, journals with a niche or a regionally focused scope, and journals from the Global South. Because these journals, although they are trustworthy, tend to be not very highly cited. The other thing we are trying to do is increase author choice for researchers that are based in regions where only publications in journals with a GIF are allowed to be submitted for research assessment. And finally, but really importantly, this is part of our ongoing commitment towards preserving the integrity of the scholarly record. So giving all quality journals a GIF will provide full transparency at the article level of how a journal has built up its citation impact. And it's also consistent with our position that publications in all trustworthy journals, all quality journals, not just highly impactful journals, should be eligible for inclusion in research assessment exercises. So ever since we announced this change in July, we've had a lot of questions about what's going to happen to journals that are accepted into the Web of Science this year. So when a journal is accepted into the Web of Science, the current year plus 2 prior years of content are indexed, and that's not going to change. So what does that mean? So in next year's JCR release, the way we're going to calculate the GIF will be by taking 2022 citations to content published in 2020 and 2021 and dividing that by publications from 2020 and 2021. So what that means is any journal that was launched in 2022 cannot have a GIF because we don't have any data for the denominator, right? There is no content in 2020 or 2021 because it was only launched in 2022. But any journal that was launched in 2021 or prior, we can calculate a GIF for, as long as there's been no gaps in content coverage. So as long as the publishers have made all that content available to us and there's no gaps in coverage, any journal that was launched in 2021 or before will be eligible to get a GIF in next June's JCR release. I just want to say a couple of words about journals in the arts and humanities. Previously, we haven't given these journals a GIF. And the reason for that is because citation rates in A&H are lower and slower than those in the sciences and in the social sciences. And so we felt this created a risk that this low GIF would be incorrectly perceived as these journals being of low quality. Now, this risk has been mitigated last year when we released the field normalized JCI, because now it is possible to use a JCI to compare arts and humanities journals with science and social science journals in a way that's fair. And also, we regularly get requests by scholars and publishers in the arts and humanities for additional metrics, especially given the increasing amount of interdisciplinary research. So I mentioned that one of the reasons we're doing this is to increase the transparency. So what this slide shows, it's all a bit tiny, I'm afraid, are 2 screenshots from a journal profile page in the JCR. So the second panel just shows the JCI trend and total citation trend, and that's currently available for journals from all 4 indices. The top panel at the moment is only available for journals in SCIE and SSCI, so journals with a GIF. And what that shows on the left is the 5-year impact factor trend, but what's more important is on the right, it breaks down that GIF figure article by article, so you have absolute full transparency how we calculated the GIF. Every article, the citations that came in, and where those citations came from. So this is what will be added for ESCI journals and AHCI journals next year. So moving on to the change from 3 decimal places to 1 decimal place. What I really want to emphasize here is that we are not in any way changing how we calculate the GIF or how we think the GIF was used. So this is a quote from Dr. Eugene Garfield again. And basically what he's saying is that the GIF was never supposed to be quoted or used to 3 decimal places. It just creates a false idea of precision. The reason that we published it to 3 decimal places is because back in 1975, when the GIF was introduced, it was sort of pre-digital age. The JCR was still print, and it was much easier to present journals that had been ordered numerically than journals that are ordered alphabetically. So that's why the GIF has been published to 3 decimal places until now. So this quote comes from 1919, so I don't think we can be accused of moving too hastily. It's taken us a little while to get here, but here we are. We're doing it, finally. So what do we think are the benefits of displaying the GIF to 1 decimal place? Firstly, as Garfield alludes to, we are removing this false precision even, that existed by showing it to 3 decimal places. And this is a good thing, because it's going to create lots and lots of ties between journals. And these ties are beneficial, in our view, because it encourages users to use other indicators and other types of descriptive data when comparing journals to one another. So, for example, one of the indicators that could be used is the JCI. The kind of descriptive data that's used could be used, for example, is how much open access content a journal publishes and how much that open access content is contributing to the citation performance of the journal. And also, who is contributing to the journal? Who are the communities around the journal in terms of institutes, in terms of regions? So this slide just shows some of the additional metrics that are available in the JCR. And this slide shows some of the descriptive data that's available on the JCR in each of the journal profile pages. So, for example, at the top left, we've got our open access panel. So this particular journal, you can see just under 34% of the content was gold open access, and that 34% of the content was contributing 37% of the citations. Below that, we've got the contribution by organizations and contributions by country region, so where the authorship of the journal lies. And on the right, we've got who's interacting with the journal. Who is the journal citing other journals, and who is the journal being cited by those journals. So again, all of these are characteristics of the journal that should be taken into account when journals are being compared. So we still haven't decided exactly how certain features are going to look like in the JCR interface next June. For example, how journal rankings will be displayed. And as soon as we make these decisions, we will be communicating them. But in the meantime, we really would welcome your feedback. So please do let us know by emailing us at isi@clarivate.com. And with that, thank you very much for your attention.